At my father's funeral, I tried holding together as people cried around me, but then my eyes caught something never forget. My wife was in the back row, quietly holding hands with my brother. The grief of losing my father instantly turned into a heartbreak deeper than itself. The realization that my own family had been betraying me all along. I need to tell someone what I've done. What we've done. Because sitting here in my empty apartment at 3 a.m., scrolling through old photos of Dad, I keep coming back to that moment. The moment everything I thought I knew about Mike crumbled like ash between my fingers. My father died on a Tuesday. Quick, they said, merciful. I was supposed to deliver his eulogy, supposed to be the strong son who held everyone together. Instead, I became the man who discovered his entire world was built on lies while mourning the only parent I had left. But let me tell how I got here, because the story doesn't start at the funeral. It starts 6 months earlier, with a text message that should have been innocent. Thanks for helping with Mom's birthday surprise. We're the best brother-in-law ever. Sarah sent it after I helped her pick out jewelry for my mother. My wife Emma was working late again. Some big project at the law firm. Sarah had called me crying because she wanted to do something special, but didn't know Mom's taste. So I met her at the mall. Just helping family, right? That's what I told when she hugged me a little too long in the parking lot. That's what I told when I noticed how her perfume lingered in my car afterwards. That's what I told when I started looking forward to her calls. Emma and I had been married for 8 years. Good years, I thought. We had our routine. She worked her long hours. I managed the family hardware store Dad was slowly handing over to me. We talked about kids but never quite pulled the trigger. Soon, we'd say. When things settled down. Sarah had been part of our lives for 5 years, ever since she started dating my younger brother Mike. She was everything Emma wasn't. Where Emma was serious and driven, Sarah was spontaneous and warm. Where Emma analyzed every decision Sarah went with her gut. And where Emma had grown distant lately, buried in work stress and what she called, growing into herself, Sarah made me feel like the most important person in the room. I should have seen the warning signs. The way Sarah started texting me directly instead of going through Emma. The way she'd find excuses to stop by the store when she knew I'd be there alone. The way she'd touch my arm when she laughed, her hand lingering just too long. The first real line got crossed during Dad's 65th birthday party. Emma had to leave early for a conference call with Tokyo. Some merger that couldn't wait, she said. I stayed to help clean and Sarah offered to help too. Mike had already left with some friends to continue the party downtown. We were washing dishes in Mom's kitchen when Sarah asked me if Emma and I were okay. What do you mean? I asked, but I knew what she meant. Even I could feel the distance growing between us. Guys just seem, I don't know, like roommates instead of married people. I should have shut it down right there. Should have said we were fine, that all marriages have their phases. Instead, I found talking, really talking, about how alone I felt, how Emma's career seemed to matter more than our relationship, how I couldn't remember the last time she looked at me the way she used to. Sarah listened, really listened, and when I was done venting, she put her hand on mine and said, "Deserve to feel appreciated, David. Deserve to feel wanted." The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too warm. I could smell her perfume again, could see the sympathy in her dark eyes. When she stepped closer, I didn't step back. We didn't kiss that night, but we crossed something else, some invisible boundary that I can't uncross now. We became conspirators in something unspoken, something that felt dangerous and intoxicating. The texts got more frequent after that. How's day going? Thinking of Bao. Emma appreciated what she has. Little emotional breadcrumbs that I gobbled like a starving man. 3 weeks later, Sarah called me in tears. Mike had been acting weird, distant. They'd had a huge about his drinking, about his lack of ambition. She needed someone to talk to. I should have told her to call Emma. Should have suggested a girl's night or therapy or literally anything except what I did. But I was already in too deep, already addicted to being her hero. So I picked her. We drove to the lake where our families used to camp when we were kids. Sarah cried about feeling unheard, unloved. I held her while she sobbed, and when she looked at me with those red-rimmed eyes and whispered, "Thank for being here," I kissed her. Not a peck, not an accident, a real kiss. The kind that changes everything. She kissed me back. That was the moment. That was when David the faithful husband died and David the cheater was born. Everything after that was just details, just a slow-motion car crash I couldn't stop watching. We told ourselves it was just one kiss, just a moment of weakness brought on by emotion and proximity, but we both knew we were lying. The affair started small, secret coffee dates while Emma was in court, long drives to nowhere while Mike was at work, hours of talking about everything and nothing, a feeling understood in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Sarah made me feel alive again, important, desired. When I was with her, I wasn't just Emma's absent husband or Dad's heir to a struggling hardware store. I was the man who made her laugh, who she called when she needed comfort, who she looked at like I hung the moon. The physical part happened gradually, a hand held too long here, a hug that lingered there. Small touches that built into bigger ones. By the time we ended in a hotel room 2 towns over, we'd already crossed so many lines that this one almost felt inevitable. I won't give the details, that's not what this is about. But I need to understand that it wasn't just. It was intimacy I hadn't felt in years. It was feeling chosen, feeling wanted, feeling like I mattered to someone again. For 4 months, I lived a double. I kissed Emma goodbye in the mornings and texted Sarah throughout the day. I ate dinner with my wife and counted hours until I could call my brother's girlfriend. I made love to Emma while thinking about Sarah, and made love to Sarah while hating for betraying Emma. But the human heart can only split so many ways before it breaks completely. The end came the way these things always do. Not with a dramatic confrontation or a moment of clarity, but with a mistake born of overconfidence. I left my phone on the kitchen counter while I showered. Emma, looking for her own phone, saw the notifications lighting my screen. 27 text messages from Sarah. 27 messages that started with, "Good morning, handsome," and got more explicit from there. When I got out of the shower, Emma was sitting on our bed, my phone in her hands, her face completely blank. "How long?" she asked. I could have lied. Could have said it was nothing, that Sarah was just going through a rough patch and reaching out for support. But looking at Emma's face, at the complete devastation in her eyes, I couldn't do it. 4 months, I whispered. She nodded like she'd expected it, like some part of her had known all along. With Sarah. Wes. Another nod. Then she set my phone down carefully on the nightstand and walked out of the room. I heard the front door open and close. I heard her car start and drive away. That was 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks of Emma staying at her sister's house, of lawyers getting involved, of Mike finding out and me off completely. 3 weeks of Sarah ending things between us, saying she couldn't handle the guilt anymore, that she needed to try to save her relationship with Mike. 3 weeks of me rattling around in a house that felt like a mausoleum, surrounded by the ghosts of the I'd destroyed. And then Dad had his heart. The funeral home smelled like lilies and regret. I sat in the front row staring at Dad's casket, trying to focus on anything except the whispered conversations happening behind me. Small towns don't keep secrets well, and by now everyone knew about Emma and me, about Sarah and me. Mom sat next to me, her hand in mine, occasionally squeezing when the grief to overwhelm her. She looked smaller somehow, like losing Dad had physically diminished her. I kept thinking about how disappointed he would have been in me, how his last weeks alive had been overshadowed by the family drama I'd created. Emma was there. I'd seen her sign the guest book, had felt her presence in the room like a physical weight, but she hadn't spoken to me, hadn't even made eye contact. She was grieving too, I realized. Dad had loved her like a daughter. In destroying our marriage, I'd also stolen her right to mourn with our family. The pastor was saying something about Dad's legacy, about the lives he'd touched and the family he'd built. I tried to listen, tried to absorb some comfort from the words, but my attention kept drifting to the crowd behind me. I could feel their eyes, could practically hear their thoughts. There's David Martinez. No, the one who cheated with his brother's girlfriend while his father was dying. Poor Emma. And poor Mike too. What kind of man betrays his own family like that? Those Martinez boys were raised better than that. Their father would have been ashamed. The worst part was that they were right. Dad would have been ashamed. He'd built his entire on loyalty, on taking care of family, on being a man people could depend on. And here I was, having betrayed every value he'd tried to instill in me. When it came time for me to deliver the eulogy, I walked to the podium on unsteady legs. I looked out at the sea of faces, some sympathetic, some curious, some openly judgmental. I found my notes, the speech I'd written about Dad's integrity and devotion to family, and suddenly couldn't breathe. How could I stand here and talk about integrity when everyone in this room knew I had none? How could I praise my father's commitment to family when I'd spent the last 4 months destroying mine? I started to speak, to deliver the safe, sanitized version of grief I'd prepared. But the words felt like ash in my mouth. Instead, I found going off script. My father was a better man than I'll ever be, I heard say. He spent 67 years building something solid, a business, a marriage, a family, a reputation, things that mattered, things that lasted. My voice cracked. Mom was looking at me with confusion and concern. I could stand here and tell I learned those lessons, that I inherited his integrity along with his business, but I can't, because in the last few months of his, while he was fighting to get better, to come back to us, I was busy destroying everything he built. The room was dead silent now, could have heard a pin drop. I cheated on my wife, I betrayed my brother, I lied to my family and I chose momentary selfish pleasure over everything that actually matters. And now Dad's gone and I can never apologize to him. I can never make this right. I looked directly at Emma then, finally meeting her eyes for the first time in weeks. She was crying, but there was something else there too. Something that might have been pity. So when remember my father, remember a man who kept his promises, who honored his commitments, who understood that some things are more important than what won in the moment. Remember everything I'm not. I left the podium without another word, walked past the shocked faces and whispered conversations, and kept walking until I was outside in the parking lot, gasping for air like a drowning man. The rest of the funeral passed in a blur. The burial, the reception at the church, the endless condolences from people who didn't know what to say to me anymore. I moved through it like a zombie, going through the motions while my mind kept replaying the last real conversation I'd had with Dad. It had been 2 weeks before he died. He'd been in the hospital for some tests, and I'd stopped by after work. He was tired but alert, and we talked about the store, about Mom, about plans for his recovery. Seemed distracted lately, son, he'd said as I was getting ready to leave. Everything okay with Emma? I should have told him then. Should have confessed everything and asked for his advice. Dad had always been the person I went to when I was lost, when I needed guidance, but I was too much of a coward, too afraid of seeing disappointment in his eyes. We're fine, Dad. Just work stress. Know how it is. He'd nodded, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. Marriage is work, David. The good days and the bad days. But it's worth the effort if we're with the right person. And Emma's the right person for. Those were among the last words he spoke to me. A reminder of what I was throwing away, delivered with a kind of gentle wisdom I'd never hear again. After the reception, after the last casserole dish was put away and the last mourner had gone home, I found alone with Mom in Dad's study. She was going through his papers, trying to make sense of all the business documents and insurance forms. I'm sorry, Mom, I said finally. She looked at me with eyes that were red from crying but still sharp with intelligence. For what, honey? The eulogy spoke from the heart. That's what Father would have wanted. For everything, for letting him down, for embarrassing our family, for making his last months about my mess instead of about him getting better. Mom set down the papers and really looked at me then. Father knew David. The words hit me like a physical, what? About the affair. Emma called me 3 weeks ago right after she found out. She was crying, didn't know what to do. I told Father that night. I felt like the floor was falling away beneath me. Why didn't he say anything? Because he was dying, son. Because he knew that whatever consequences faced, whatever happened to marriage, it wasn't going to bring him back. He didn't want to spend his last days dealing with family drama. She wiped her eyes with a tissue. But he was disappointed. I won't lie to about that. He loved Emma like she was his own daughter. And Mike, Father was proud of the relationship Mike and Sarah had built. He thought they were going to get married. The guilt hit me in waves. Not only had I betrayed my wife and brother, but I'd stolen my dying father's peace. I'd made his final weeks about managing the chaos I'd created instead of about healing and hope. He did say one thing. Mom continued. The night before he died, he said, I hope David figures out what really matters before it's too late. And it was already too late. Emma had filed for divorce. Mike wasn't speaking to me. Sarah had moved out of town to stay with her sister, trying to salvage what she could of her relationship with Mike from a distance. The store was struggling because I couldn't focus on anything. And now Dad was gone, taking with him any chance of redemption or forgiveness. I was about to leave Mom's house when I saw them. Through the front window, in the driveway next to mine, Mike was helping Sarah load boxes into her car. They were talking quietly, and even from a distance, I could see the careful way they moved around each other, like people trying to rebuild something that had been shattered. When Sarah looked and saw me watching through the window, the expression on her face broke something inside me. It wasn't anger or hatred. It was worse than that. It was nothing. I had become nothing to her. A mistake she was trying to forget. Mike followed her gaze and saw me too. For just a moment, our eyes met. My little brother who I'd taught to ride a bike and helped with homework and stood for when bullies picked on him at school. The brother who had looked to me as entire. The look he gave me wasn't angry either. It was worse than anger. It was grief. He was mourning me the same way we'd all mourned Dad, like I was already dead to him. Then he turned away and went back to loading boxes, and I realized that was probably the last time I'd ever see my brother's face. It's been 6 months since Dad's funeral. 6 months since I stood at that podium and told a room full of people exactly what kind of man I really am. 6 months of living with consequences I never imagined when I first kissed Sarah in that parking lot. The divorce papers came through last week. Emma kept the house, the savings, most of everything we'd built together. I didn't contest any of it. How could I? She'd invested 8 years in a man who turned out to be a lie. The least I could do was let her keep the material things. I'm living in a studio apartment above the hardware store now. The same store Dad built from nothing, that he'd planned to retire from and hand over to me. Except there might not be much left to hand over. Business has dropped off significantly since word got out about what I did. Small towns have long memories, and apparently sleeping with brother's girlfriend while wife grieves and father dies is the kind of thing people don't forgive easily. Mrs. Henderson, who'd been shopping with us for 30 years, switched it to the big box store outside of town. I just don't feel comfortable supporting a business run by someone with no moral compass, she told my mother. Mom pretended it didn't, but I saw her face. That's been the hardest part. Not my own consequences, but watching the people I love pay for my choices. Mom lost her husband and now she's losing customers who've been family friends for decades. She's watching the business her husband spent his building crumble because of what I did. Emma's sister posted pictures from Emma's birthday party last month. Emma looked happy, genuinely happy, in a way I hadn't seen in years. She was surrounded by friends, laughing at something someone had said. There was a lightness in her face that made me realize how heavy I'd been making her without even knowing it. I stared at those pictures for hours, trying to remember the last time I'd made her laugh like that. The last time she'd looked at me with pure joy instead of obligation or frustration. I couldn't remember. Maybe that's part of why I strayed. Maybe I was trying to find someone who could make me feel the way Emma and I used to make each other feel. But that's just another lie I tell to avoid the real truth. I cheated because I'm selfish. Because I wanted what I wanted more than I wanted to honor my commitments. Because when faced with the choice between temporary pleasure and permanent integrity, I chose wrong. Mike and Sarah are engaged now. I saw the announcement in the local paper. They're planning a small wedding this fall, just family and close friends. I won't be invited, obviously. I become the absent brother, the ghost at family gatherings, the son Mom has to make excuses for. Sarah looks happy in their engagement photo. Really, genuinely happy. Happier than she ever looked with me. And Mike looks like a man who's learned what it means to for something precious. Like maybe almost losing Sarah taught him not to take her for granted. I'm glad for them. I know that sounds hollow coming from me, but it's true. They deserve better than what I gave them. They deserved a brother and boyfriend who lifted them instead of tearing them down. If they've found their way back to each other, if they've built something stronger than what they had before, then at least some good came out of this disaster. The loneliness is the worst part. I knew I'd lose Emma, knew I'd probably lose Mike. What I didn't anticipate was how completely I'd lose the man I used to be, the man who could look himself in the mirror without flinching. That person is gone. In his place is someone I don't recognize, someone I don't particularly like. I've been going to therapy. Rodriguez is patient with me, helps me work through the guilt and shame without letting me wallow in it. She says healing is possible, that people can change, that this doesn't have to be the end of my story. Some days I almost believe her. But then I remember Dad's face in that hospital room, trusting me to take care of the family and the business while he was gone. I remember Emma's face when she found those text messages, the way something died in her eyes right in front of me. I remember Mike's back as he walked away from me for the last time. Those memories don't fade. They sit with me in the quiet moments, in the empty apartment above the failing store, in the bed I sleep in alone every night. They remind me that some mistakes can't be unmade. Some trust, once broken, can never be rebuilt. I'm not writing this for sympathy. I'm not looking for forgiveness or understanding or second chances. I'm writing this because maybe someone else is standing where I stood 8 months ago. Maybe someone else is looking at a text message that seems innocent, or justifying a coffee date that feels dangerous, or telling themselves that what their spouse doesn't know won't them. Maybe someone else is about to throw away everything that matters for something that doesn't. If we're reading this and recognizing in my story, please listen to me. Don't do it. Don't take that first step down the road I traveled. Don't kiss that other person. Don't send that text. Don't meet for that drink. Because once start, can't stop the avalanche. Once break that first promise, every other promise becomes easier to break, and by the time realize what are losing, it's already gone. Dad used to say that character is what do when nobody's watching. But that's not quite right. Character is what do when someone is watching and think can get away with it anyway. Character is choosing the hard right thing over the easy wrong thing, even when the easy wrong thing is exactly what want. I failed that test spectacularly. I chose wrong every single time I had the chance to choose right, and now I'm living with the consequences while everyone I love moves on without me. Emma's happy. Mike and Sarah are building something beautiful together. Mom's learning to navigate widowhood with grace and strength, is moving forward for everyone except me. I'm stuck here, in the wreckage I created, trying to figure out if there's any way to rebuild. Not the relationships I destroyed, those are gone forever. Not the trust I broke, that can never be repaired. But maybe some version of that I can live with. Some way to honor Dad's memory and Mom's love and the pain I caused Emma and Mike. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if I deserve that chance. But I know I have to try. Because the alternative is staying exactly where I am. Alone with my guilt and my regret and my memories of everything I used to have before it all away for someone who was never really mine to begin with. The hardware store closes at 6. I'll climb the stairs to my empty apartment, heat something frozen for dinner, and try not to think too hard about that I used to have. Tomorrow I'll do it all again. And the day after that. This is what's left when trade everything permanent for something temporary.